And we see further evidence of this homeopathic oversimplicity in Samuel Hahnemann's concept of miasms. As Wikipedia writes, quote, Hahnemann introduced the concept of miasms as infectious principles underlying chronic disease. Hahnemann associated each miasm with specific diseases and thought that initial exposure to miasms causes local symptoms, such as skin or venereal diseases. If, however, these symptoms were suppressed by medication, the cause went deeper and began to manifest itself as diseases of the internal organs. Homeopathy maintains that treating diseases by directly alleviating their symptoms, as is sometimes done in conventional medicine, is ineffective because all disease can generally be traced to some latent, deep-seated, underlying chronic or inherited tendency. The underlying imputed miasm still remains, and deep-seated ailments can be corrected only by removing the deeper disturbance of the vital force. Hahnemann's hypothesis for the direct or remote cause of all chronic diseases, miasms, originally presented only 3 miasms: psora, the itch, syphilis, venereal disease, or psychosis, figwort disease. Hahnemann believed psora to be the cause of such diseases as epilepsy, cancer, jaundice, deafness, and cataracts. End quote. Hahnemann's general viewpoint of how diseases manifest and progress appears to be starkly at odds with the understanding provided by conventional medicine, that is to say, effective medicine, as attested to by mountains of data and double-blind trials. And that's because sometimes medication simply does work. For example, if you take the appropriate medication, you will be cured of your tuberculosis. There is a grain of truth in Hahnemann's analysis, however. Some of our healthcare system does focus on treating symptoms rather than the underlying causes. For example, prescribing cholesterol-lowering medication rather than simply implementing a healthy diet in the first place. But the thing is, these medications do the things that they're designed to do, at least to a certain extent. And Hahnemann's solution to this allegedly faulty approach to medicine isn't actually to get at the root cause of the illness, as he claims. Instead, as we'll soon see, his solution is to provide the patient with utterly ineffective junk medicine, which isn't much of a solution at all. Now, in his defense, his ideas were formulated in the late 1700s, and conventional medicine back then wasn't nearly as effective as it is today, so perhaps we can cut him some slack for developing his viewpoints during that time period. But there is no excuse for maintaining these views in the 21st century. Another thing to notice about these so-called miasms is that they arbitrarily classify a wide range of diseases into these neat little categories. We're told that all of these medical conditions have the same underlying cause. Could you imagine visiting a doctor and having him be like, well, look, deafness, cancer, cataracts, at the end of the day, it's all the same shit. How likely would you be to visit this doctor again or recommend him to a friend? Not very likely, I imagine. No, you'd be like, this person is talking moonshine and he should be fired. Cataracts are caused by the clouding of the lens within the eye. Cancer is caused by cell replication gone haywire. Deafness can be caused by inner ear damage, nerve damage, or genetic defects. To group such a wide assortment of medical conditions under the same causal umbrella requires the most extreme ignorance of how these conditions actually develop. And I should also add, returning to that homeopathyschool.com quote, that any system of medicine that takes for granted the existence of a literal spirit or soul is a system of medicine that should be distrusted, because anybody who's closely studied the brain can tell you that certain regions of the brain are responsible for certain aspects of our cognition. Damaging these regions produces the predictable cognitive defects, and thus there's no reason to believe that our conscious experience is anything more than the product of our brain. It's a telltale sign that an alleged treatment is completely ineffective if the person trying to sell it to you promises spiritual healing. This is what the televangelist tells you when he tries to sell you a vial of water from Lourdes. This is what you hear from the New Age crackpot trying to sell you some crystals from Atlantis. You're never going to hear this kind of talk from a respectable, legitimate practitioner of medicine, even if they do have deeply held religious beliefs. Something else to note about this idea of miasms is that it appears to be completely unfalsifiable. As we read on homeopathytraining.co.uk, quote, "A miasm rarely has physical symptoms, or at least not symptoms an allopathic doctor would diagnose, and so is never acknowledged and therefore treated." End quote. If it has no physical symptoms, how can you even consistently, reliably detect it? And how can you disprove the existence of something that doesn't manifest in any physical way? If there's no test we could subject this idea to potentially prove it false, then this idea is flatly unscientific and shouldn't even be taken seriously, because unfalsifiability is the trademark of a bad hypothesis. Another thing to notice about miasms is how uselessly vague their alleged consequences are. As homeopathy training writes, quote, "A miasm is an underlying disease pattern which, when awakened in the body energy system, can imbalance the mind and emotions, contribute to physical disease, and misdirect one's life path." Miasms live in the space between the two worlds of energy and matter, and their far-reaching tendrils influence our thoughts, our intentions, our life choices, and the physical way in which we tell the stories of our lives. End quote. Compare this obscure language to what you would hear from a doctor if you asked him about the symptoms of strep throat. He wouldn't tap dance around the question and give you answers like, well, it can cause a general imbalance. It can influence your behavior. No, he would give you a straightforward list of symptoms: pain while swallowing, fever, swollen lymph nodes, and so forth. And miasms live in the space between the two worlds of energy and matter. How have you determined this? What instruments have you used to measure and confirm this? And how do you reliably distinguish between imbalances of the mind and emotions caused by miasms and those caused by other factors? For that matter, how do you even quantify some of these consequences? What metric do you use to determine if one's life path has been misdirected? I could just as easily come forward and say that tiny, invisible demons, which live in the space between energy and matter, imbalance our mind and emotions, contribute to physical disease, and misdirect our path in life. But if there is no test that we could subject this idea to prove it false, and if there is no physical evidence of these tiny, invisible demons, what reason do we have to believe that these demons exist? I'm on Patreon. There's a link in the description if you'd like to support my content. I would really appreciate it. There's also social media links in there if you want to follow me there. I'm trying to build up some of those followings. I would really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe for more videos if you haven't already. Hit the bell, hit the like button, post a fucking comments. All that fun stuff that's standard on YouTube. You know the fucking drill. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this.